Welcome to Classroom Secrets. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to interviewing you and finding out lots of the things you've been doing and also how that can help teachers as well. So I just thought it'd be really helpful. We've obviously had a conversation before, but can you just give me a background of your journey into teaching and then throughout teaching so far? Because it just helps people build a picture of who you are and why you could help them.
So I didn't do my PGC until I was about 28, 29, so I came quite late into teaching. I did my PGC down in London, and when I qualified I was in reception for my first year, and that was the hardest year. You can imagine being a 6'3" tall guy with kids about knee height. It was quite dangerous at times. And, and reception is a really tough year to do, and I don't think people realise how hard reception can be unless you've actually done it. So I did reception for a year.
Or you've got a 3-year-old.
Oh, you've got a 3-year-old, yeah. There's that. And I think at the time, I wasn't a parent, so I think it was more difficult for me at the time because I wasn't a parent. I didn't understand, children at that age as much as I would have thought I'd like to anyway. So then I did that for a year, and then I thought, well, I don't know what year I want to teach. Do I want to teach reception, year 6, year 3, year 4, year 2? What do I want to do? So I decided to do supply for a year. So during that year of supply, one day I'd be in year 6, the next day I'd be in reception, next day I'd be in year 4, in nursery. I was all over the place, and I really enjoyed that. And I got to see not only the different year groups, but the different schools, because some schools are so different depending on what school you go to. So then from there I had an extended supply in the year 3 class. And then I thought, right, I want to do Key Stage 2. So I applied for a job in Bolton, Devonshire Road Primary School, and I got a year 6 job. And when I got year 6, I was like, oh no, not year 6. I've got the SATs. I was really, how am I going to do this? All right, just give it a go. So I was there, and I absolutely loved year 6.
Just to interrupt, do you feel like you got year 6 because you're a man?
I've no idea. I think.
So I think some people think that, don't they?
Yeah,
we've got a man in Key Stage 2.
Yeah.
Put them in year 6.
But then again, there's a lack of male teachers in
That's
EYFS and Key Stage 1, so I'm not sure about that. But I enjoyed it. I was there for 5 years. I had 5 classes. First year was just a learning curve for me because that's when the curriculum changed as well. And then I really got into the swing of year 6, and I absolutely loved it. But then our second child came along, and I wasn't seeing the first one, Hugo, as much as I was seeing as I'd like to, because even though it wasn't far to travel, distance-wise, I used to get back quite late. So I decided to move to a school closer to me, but a school that I had a good feel of when I went to go and see it, which was Tottington Primary, where I've been ever since. I got that job there, and I was in year 3-4, so a mixed year 3-4 class, but we've got 22, 23 year 4 and some year 3s as well mixed in there. And I've been there ever since, and since I've been there, I've gone down to 4 days in January because I started my Facebook page around about 2 years ago, I think it was. And I just started it just to share some ideas and just show what's going on in class, because I thought maybe people could use it in their class. If one person uses a lesson that I've done in class in theirs and it benefits them, then great. And then I remember I got something like 100 followers. I was like, oh my gosh, 100 people are interested in what I've got to say. This is amazing. And then it's just grew and grew, and different videos have kind of gone, like that one, the floss dance one that went viral and had something ridiculous, like I think 7 million views or something silly.
And if you haven't seen the floss video, then we'll post a link on the live, and we'll also make sure it's in the show notes as well, so that people can see.
Yeah, and I do charge for live performances of that very dance now. £1 per swing, and you can get a lot of swings per minute as well.
Wow. Maybe we should get one right now.
Oh gosh, no. I might pull out this microphone. But yeah, so that I put various lessons, and then I went down to 4 days in January because, in school we talk about the kids having a growth mindset, take risks. We talk about that all the time, and I thought, I've got people asking me to go to their schools to do CPD, and I wanted to spend more time on other projects that I was doing. I mean, I worked with HP and BT and done various different projects in my own time, and I was struggling to fit it in. Or I was having to take a day off school. I paid the school supply, and then I was taking time out. So I thought, just try it for a year or 6 months. And my school is so supportive. They've been wonderful with everything that I've done. So I went down to 4 days. And since then, I've almost had to turn things away because I've had too much to do. But it's great because I get 4 days in class, which is still my favourite part of the week. And then the one day, I get to do something different each week, something that I never would have thought I could have done when I first started teaching.
So do you feel like it's working out for you doing 4 days, or are you looking at something else?
I think 4 days, just because when I do CPD sessions, for example, or when I go into schools, everything I talk about that works, I can say I know it works because I did it last week or I did it the week before.
You've tried it.
And I think teachers relate to that. And because I'm still within the classroom, I'm still in touch with what's going on in the classroom, and it's still my favourite thing, the 4 days. I mean, I'm lucky at that at the moment. At my TA, she's Mrs. Bowler, she's ace. She's me on Friday.
That was a shout out for you.
Yeah, that was from Mrs. Bowler. She's me on Friday, and she's my TA throughout the week. So I was worried when I went to 4 days, how will it disrupt the class? Like how will it work for them? But because they still have that consistency of Mrs. Bowler being in the whole week, by the time it comes to a Friday, she's still able to, and she's a great teacher as well. So, yes, since then it's taken me places that I didn't think I could go to. I was speaking to someone before how I went to Barcelona 3 weeks ago, and that was through making a connection through Nexus Education and making connections, and then them asking me to go to Barcelona to do a keynote on some of the work that I've done in class, and I never thought that would have been possible. And I think I'm glad I took that risk, because if I wouldn't have done, I wouldn't have known these other things that could have happened, and I would have still loved it in my class, would have still been in class full time, but I wouldn't have had these opportunities that I've had. And then I'm sat here now. That's coming from doing extra things in my own time. So I love teaching. I think it's the best job in the whole world, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Oh,
good. Well, I won't ask you then if you if you want to leave teaching.
No, definitely not.
So you've mentioned, like, you've kind of touched on some of the things that you've done, but you haven't sort of told me the story. So we had a conversation a few weeks ago, and you told me basically what you've actually done with your children and how it's taken you to where you are now, where you can sort of be a bit more influential in the education sort of sector. So do you want to tell me the story? I don't want to say the word, but the story that you told me.
Right, it's a long story, but it's a
good story. So just tell it.
About 5-6 years ago, I watched the film Blackfish at the weekend on a Saturday, and at the time we were doing a topic around we had to do balanced arguments, and I thought that'd be a great topic to do, because I'd been to, and if you've not seen Blackfish, it basically talks about how killer whales or orcas are too big to be in the small tanks that they live in, and it's dangerous for them and the people that look after them. So I'd been to SeaWorld when I was 16, and I thought, it is, when you go to SeaWorld, have you ever seen these huge animals jumping out of the tanks and performing? It's amazing to see, and you want to see more of it. But I didn't know the flip side of how they got there in the first place, and the conditions that they live in, and why they all have collapsed dorsal fins. So I did some work around that with the kids. On the first day I said, right guys, who would like to go to SeaWorld? So they all said, yep, we'd love to go to SeaWorld. I showed them a video of one of them performing, and then we've written some arguments for us trying to persuade the head teacher to send us to SeaWorld to see them live. And then the next day I said, how do you think they got there in the first place? And they couldn't answer it, because they'd probably never thought about, well, how did they get there in the first place? Because it's not like they swam there and they stay in the tanks and they go off. So I showed them some of the clips from the Blackfish where it shows them being taken from the sea as babies and kind of stuck in a tank, and then when you look deep into it, they come from all around the world and they speak different languages, so they don't always get along together. One of them, Tilikum, who died a couple of years ago, he's killed 2 people, but because of his psychological, the way he was he was huge and he was in such a small tank, and so there's lots of arguments for and against it. It was a great topic, and because when you do anything with animals, kids really sort of relate. They can sort of relate to animals. They have a love of animals. Young kids, they do love animals. So
also maybe that sense of not being in control as well.
And they can understand, like, how would they've been taken from their mother. How would, like, we mapped out the size and scale of if you was in a room the size of this big for the rest of your life, how would you feel? And they got it very quickly, probably quicker than adults would, I think. So we did some poetry around the topic, and we put it on Facebook, on YouTube, and then there was an organisation in France called Marineland who translated into French and said, can we use your video? We'll translate into French, because they're based in France, because there's still a marine park in France called Marine Park that have killer whales there. So they're against that. So then they said, can we translate into French? So we said yes, and then the day after it had 200,000 views or something ridiculous. So from something that we did on a wet Wednesday afternoon in Bolton, it was pinging around the world in a different language. So I thought, I'm not going to do another subject next week. I'm going to stick with this, because the kids are enthusiastic. They want to write and they want to work. I'm just there to facilitate that. So we did some other work, and then we spoke to Sam Berg from the film, because I pinged her an email and I said, "There's any chance we could speak to you, because she's one of the main trainers who is friends with someone that died at SeaWorld. Any chance we could talk to you?" And she said, "Well, I'm speaking to CNN, I'm speaking to NBC, but I've got a spare hour." So I checked my diary and I said, "Yep, that's fine. We're good with that." So it was during Christmas this time now. Excuse me. And I said to the kids, "We want to speak to Sam Berg." And as a teacher, you sometimes, technically you lie to your kids sometimes, to get, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But they didn't quite believe what I was saying was true. So they still create questions anyway, really, really good questions. And then we spoke to her live from Alaska for about an hour, and it was amazing, because I kind of sat there. It was one of the best lessons that I just stood in the corner while the kids had a full-on debate and a discussion with a scientist and someone that's been on TV.
Amazing.
And then, so the week after, there was an organisation called Born Free, if you've heard of those, and the Dolphinarium. There's a bill that was trying to be passed in European Parliament a few months later, and they said, "Would you like to be part of this in some way?" So I said, "I'd love to." So we then written to the government. We then did some. We've collected signatures, something like 2,000 signatures in support of. The bill was called the ban on captive cetaceans in EU tanks, and cetaceans are basically dolphins and anything bigger than a dolphin.
Okay.
Basically too intelligent animals to be in these small tanks, and that's what we were supporting. So we were supporting that, and then we got another phone call from Born Free that said, "Is there any chance that you and a few kids can come to Brussels with us? Because we'd like to be part of handing in your petition, and then we'd like to be part of an event that was going on there." So I went to my head teacher and I said, "Have you got about 10 grand spare that I could go to Brussels?" And she said, "Well, not really, because we're struggling to buy pens and glue sticks, let alone send a bunch of kids to European Parliament." So I could have stopped at that point. And when we talked about taking risks, so I delved a bit further, and I found that MEPs have a certain amount of budget that they give to schools on educational trips. So I spoke to Sajid Karim, who is the Northwest MEP, and I said, "We'd love to come over at this specific time to hand in our petition." And they didn't even question it. They said, "Yeah." And then I kind of filled in some forms, did the longest risk assessment you can imagine, going to Brussels. And then we had to choose 10
with primary
kids.
school children abroad.
Exactly. And I had to choose 10 kids, and that was something I was worried about, because how do I choose 10 out of 60 kids that are all passionate about this subject?
Yeah.
So we did a random draw. It was easy because a lot of them didn't have passports, so we kind of narrowed it down. And we chose the 10. What was so lovely to see was those 10 that got chosen, the rest of the kids weren't disheartened that they weren't going. They were supportive for the fact that they've been chosen and they're going to do this and represent them. So a few weeks later, we was in, it's March time it was, we were sat in a coach at 5 a.m. with 10 kids, deputy head teacher and my TA, ready to go to Brussels. So we got a coach, we got to Manchester Airport, flew over, and we
flew the children on the plane.
Yep, I know. It was fun.
Yeah, I bet it was.
It was worrying as well. And then we got another coach, and then we got a tram, and then we walked around the central square of the main square of Brussels. From there, the next day we went to European Parliament. We had a tour around this huge chamber. Then we went to a room, and then we handed our petition in. Sajid Karim got his pictures, and then we sort of left. And then that evening we were invited with the Blackfish crew to come back to watch a screening of Blackfish, but we didn't realise it was like a premiere of it with a red carpet and photographers in the centre of Brussels. So there's me with my deputy and my TA, 10 kids from Bolton with their blue jumpers on, walking down a red carpet in the middle of a premiere because of something we did in Bolton 3 months before. So then we went in the main chamber, and then this chamber is absolutely huge, and then they said, "You're sat at the front." So I was, "Really?" We're sat at the, so they took us down to the front. We sat right at the front, right in front of the big, right at the front there. And then they had SeaWorld and anti-captivity people having a huge debate and argument after we'd watched the film as well. And then the lights came on and they opened up questions to the floor. So they had these little microphones here on the little button, and the room was full of people, scientists, MEPs, and then 10 kids from Bolton at the front. And one of my kids, Bradley, he pressed the buzzer and put his hand up like this. And I was at the other end, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what is he going to say now? Because this could go terribly wrong, or it could go really well." And he, they looked down at us because they thought, "Who are these kids here?" And he tapped the microphone, and everyone, because you had these headphones on, because it was being translated into languages, and he tapped the microphone, and he said, he gave the statistic to SeaWorld, and he said, why is it that 100% of male killer whales have collapsed dorsal fins? Do you know the dorsal fins on the top? They're all collapsed. If the male's in captivity, they're all collapsed. But in the wild, it's 0.05%, and it's usually because they're about to die. That's what happens. Why is that SeaWorld? And then everyone kind of looked around and thought, who's this kid here at the front? Because he's just schooled SeaWorld. The anti-captivity people kind of like smiled and looked at SeaWorld to say, what are you going to do about this? The SeaWorld people looked down at Bradley and thought, well, we're prepared for any scientist to have a go at us, but not a little kid. Boy.
Yeah.
And then
it's moving, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was just sat there going, oh my gosh, like what's going on here? And then he was waiting, like as if to say, go on, what are you going to say? And I was like, because I was right at the other end, I was like, I wanted to stand up and like do a little dance and stuff. But they couldn't answer. They kind of stumbled on the words. They didn't know what to say. And then they said, well, any more questions? So obviously, because Bradley had been the first one to do it, the rest of the 10, they all pressed the buzzer like this with the hand up, waving around. And I just sat back. And obviously the anti-captivity people were just smiling because they didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
At SeaWorld were worried and confused because they were losing an argument against 10 kids. Yeah. And I was sat there thinking, God, I only planned this on a weekend like a few months ago. What's going on here? And then so they held their own and they had a full-on argument with SeaWorld. But to them, it didn't seem to. It was more of a thing for me than for them because they were passionate and they were talking openly about what was going on. But they didn't. I don't think they realised at the time what a big thing.
Yeah.
So the next day we went to a chocolate museum and we went around Belgium and had loads of chocolate. And then I went back and I thought, all right, what am I going to do now? Because what's my next topic going to be after that? Yeah. Like, how would you top that?
But you must have felt so proud because the children knew, or they obviously knew so much about it. They remembered it because they were so passionate to ask those questions and feel like they could make a difference.
And it didn't stop there. So 2 months later, SeaWorld threatened me. They sent me a letter to the school. It was a full-on letter saying, how dare you do this? You shouldn't be doing this, this and this. These are the statistics that we believe in. So at the time I thought, right, well, am I going to get in trouble because I don't want to get sued by SeaWorld because of the lesson I'm giving in class?
Yeah.
So I phoned Bone Free and I said, where do I stand here? Am I in trouble? What's going to go on? He said, well, no, what they do is they see people, because we made the news and we were on TV and the newspapers and stuff. What they do, they look out and they search for people that have said these things negative against what they believe in. And then what happens is they'll send these letters and a lot of people will just stop what they're doing. But they said, in fact, it's just a blanket letter. They'll make it sound threatening and they'll want you to be worried and they want you to stop. So what I did was I did the opposite that they thought it would happen. So I printed off all their statistics in A3 and I pinned it on the wall. So as the kids came in, they all walked in and they all said, well, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And they were really angry that they tried to scare me. So then we've written 60 letters back to back to SeaWorld and said, well, you're wrong because of this, this and this. And then they never bothered with us again. And since then, last year we did another project to do with Born Free and to do with Free Morgan, who's a killer whale in Tenerife, about trying to free this killer whale, and then got in contact with Jeffrey Ventura, who was the other trainer from the film. He's my friend. I spoke to him a couple of days ago now, and then he invited me to Seattle last year. So I flew over to Seattle because of the work I'd done with my class a few years ago and last year. So I flew over to Seattle. They picked me up in Seattle, took me to San Juan Island, which was this island just off the coast of Washington State. And there was this big conference going on called Superpod 6. And I had 45 minutes to talk after the Canadian Senate. So there was the Canadian Senate and then me, which was, I remember sitting there thinking, this is just surreal that I'm sat in this huge theatre on this island.
A primary school teacher from Bolton.
Yeah, because of something I did a few years ago and last year in Tottington. So then it was my turn to go up. I was so nervous. I stood down and I thought, right, just go with it. And I had clips of cute English kids as well to be part of it. And we got a standing ovation at the end. Yeah. And afterwards, I had all these people that I'd read their books. So Ingrid Vessa, I was reading a book on the way there. She took me out for lunch the next day. Jeffrey Ventura, he took me on his boat. And then we got off, went kayaking. And the reason why they have it on this San Juan Island is because around that time they have resident killer whales, which basically circle this island for these 2 weeks because of the Chinook salmon. So I was kayaking and I had 10 killer whales just there, just next to me singing. It was weird that I finally got to see them from on SeaWorld, doing all this work, and then I was there kayaking with them just there. So that was last year, and I'm going back next year. We're going again, and we're doing some work in this next academic year to do with Morgan again. So I'm going back next year. So yeah, I know that's a long answer.
That's amazing. That's the story I wanted you to tell, because you've taken learning outside the classroom, haven't you? And I think, I want to know really, has the reaction you've had made you think differently about what you're planning in your lessons and what you deliver in the classroom?
Yeah, during that session I went to in Barcelona, there was a guy before, I can't remember his name, but he said schools shouldn't do. Do you know the Las Vegas, the saying around Las Vegas, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Yeah. He said schools should have the opposite effect. Whatever happens in the classroom should go out of the classroom. And I thought, right, that really explains what I'm about. And I think it could be anything, by giving the children the tools to look at both sides of an argument and make their own viewpoints of those arguments. It's just a skill to have in no matter what you look at. Like with the floss dance thing, we had 7 million views and we had loads of positive comments, and then there was one comment that said, what is the world coming to with these teachers dancing during lessons when they should be teaching? So I photocopied that one comment and I put it on the wall, and we had a discussion about the fact that, is she okay to think that? Because all she'd seen was a 1-minute video of me dancing with some kids. She wasn't to know that it was during break time. She wasn't to know that we said, who wants to do this at break time? 5 of us. We did it in literally 2 minutes, press record, we danced to it and went back. She's okay to think that. And I think children are so used to having they want positive comments all the time, and they don't know how to deal with someone that says something negative, especially with the social media world. And I think we as teachers need to teach them the fact that people will disagree with you. Yeah. Whether they're right or wrong, that's okay, and they're okay to feel like that. You might not agree with them, but they can feel like that. And if they don't agree with you, then you've just got to accept it. Yeah. And also, when you see a newspaper, especially things like the Daily Mail, just because it's an article doesn't mean it's correct what it says. No. There's always 2 sides of a story, and then just to not take things on as read. And I think that's what I believe in. And with if I would have stopped, like going back to that story, if I would have stopped when they said there was no funding, none of this would have happened. I may not have even been sat here now, but because I thought, well, no, I'm going to try something, and explain this all the way to the kids. So can you imagine those kids now that they'll be in secondary school? What have you done to do with European Parliament? Well, I've been to European Parliament, and I completely forgot to say something that a year after we got back, I got a letter from the European Parliament that the law actually got changed, and my kids and my name's named on this official law. Yeah. So my kids have literally changed law in European Parliament before they even hit secondary school. So you can imagine those kids when they get older, what they think they can achieve. Yeah.
And it's that thing as well, isn't it? It's giving value to it. So when you get a job, you do something for a reason, whereas often in school it's all pretend. So even if you film something, it never gets shown. Yeah. But now teachers are starting to sort of put it on YouTube. It is getting, it's doing it for a purpose, and I think that definitely gives them more of a reason. And when they're going to Parliament, it's because it's for a reason. They're doing it for a reason, and they're writing for a reason. When they wrote to SeaWorld, it's not that, let's write a fictional letter to the head teacher to ask if we can have a non-uniform day.
Yeah, which is the usual one.
Yeah, this is it. It's, let's actually send it to a real company that actually is about something real. And I guess in that sense, you're going to get better work out of them because they're going to believe in it. They're going to feel that it's real.
And I think we sometimes underestimate what kids are capable of.
Yeah.
I mean, we test them a lot, but
and what they understand about the world.
Like, we shouldn't tell them this in case they don't understand it. Well, maybe they could personify a killer whale, because give them the opportunity. And I mean, sometimes things they don't always go well. No. But I think you learn just as much from those things that don't go well as something that does. Yeah. But yeah, I love writing for a purpose, doing things for. I mean, I ask a lot of kids now what they want to be when they're older. They say a YouTuber. That's like one of the number one things. Well, as a teacher, you can either just ignore that or you can tap into it a little bit. So when we do poetry, we always record it, because poetry is supposed to be performed. It's not supposed to be on paper. Whenever we do lessons, if we can record it and put it on YouTube. I mean, I'm lucky that at my school we don't ignore the Facebook, YouTube thing, because some schools are like, oh, we don't like social media. If we put it in a box over there, on a nice little pink box, it won't exist. Well, it still exists. And by tackling social media and talking about it openly, our kids that we have in school, they like when I said about the fact that people don't always agree with you, that's what happens in social media when things can spiral. Our kids are almost prepared for that when they do go to social media. I'm not saying in reception give a kid a Facebook account, but what I am saying is we don't just ignore it just because we're a bit scared of it.
So obviously we talked about this before, but in business we talk a lot about risk and reward. So the higher the risk that you're prepared to take, then the greater the reward you get from that. So do you feel as though you've adapted this into your teaching, and do you think teachers should be taking bigger risks?
I did accidentally, I think. I didn't realise that that's what I was doing when we first did the killer whale things and subsequent lessons and things that I've done since, that if I wouldn't have tried it, it would have never happened. I think if you don't try things, you're always going to cap what the children and you as a teacher as well can achieve. But if you open it up a little bit, then you're not putting a roof on what could happen. You're kind of letting the children to see. I mean, the biggest thing at the moment is in education is the lack of creativity, but that's to do with testing, I believe. But by doing this different approach for writing for a purpose, letting children achieve things, then it's giving. I don't know. I just believe that if we take more risks, things will go wrong, but then they'll go right as well. And
you've got to take the rough with the smooth, haven't you?
Because like we mentioned before, the growth mindset is a huge thing in education, but a lot of teachers are teaching growth mindset, but then still sticking with the same way that they teach, even though we're telling kids, you guys take risks, it's fine to get things wrong, but I'm going to stay teaching the exact same way because that's what I'm comfortable with. But it shouldn't be like that. If we're telling the kids this, and as teachers, if we practice what we preach, then we'll get more rewards for ourselves and for the kids that we teach as well.
I guess it's about leadership understanding that as well, because it's almost like, oh, well, it's okay for the children to make mistakes, but the teachers aren't allowed to make mistakes. So yes, you can do it as long as it works. And it's understanding that sometimes you have to try things and they don't work, and everyone being okay with that. And allowing for that to happen. It's that resilience
about showing and then talking about it. If something goes wrong in the lesson, I've said, gosh, that lesson didn't go as well as I thought. Why do you think? And then they said, well, Miss Thornton, because I think this, this and this. And then they've then critiqued what I've done, which means if I did something similar again, I think back to what that class said. Because those are the ones that we teach. Yeah,
and reviewing everything, I think. But in an informal way, a positive way. Do you think now that you always look for ways to take things bigger than the classroom?
I wouldn't say always. I think if it fits, I wouldn't force it. Every time we do a subject, I wouldn't think this needs to go global or viral. If it fits, then what ways can we incorporate within the subject or lesson? But I wouldn't say always, because I think if you always do it, then again the kids will kind of get used to trying to want to. I think they need to have a balance. But it's a balance, really. I'd say sometimes you go big, or sometimes you just have to teach certain things and make it as exciting and fun as possible, but sometimes you just have to get those curriculum things in. But then when something
and that's
fits,
a life skill in itself, isn't it?
And but if something fits, and you can do something a little bit different, then I think you should give it a go. So
when you did about the whales, it kind of just went away with itself, and you decided to go with it, which was a really good decision. Is there a certain way that you plan a topic now, trying to keep in mind that it could go somewhere, or do you kind of have an end goal still? How do you?
So my school, we're theme based, so we do different themes, and sometimes it's quite difficult to fit certain things in a particular theme, but what we do is in the summer, we just did this with my year group partners as well, we look at what subjects we've got coming over the year, what themes. So our first theme is Romans, and we look at how we can best utilise that topic, because some topics are better for geography, sometimes they just fit better. So I have an idea, but I don't think you can fully plan something unless you know the kids, because I could plan something based on what I think the kids would like, but until I know the kids, I don't think you can. It depends on your cohort. Every single year group is completely different. Sometimes things fit well in each year, but sometimes it just doesn't go as well as the way you've done it before, not because you've taught it differently, because the kids are different. So I like to get to know the kids first, so that's why the first 2 weeks at school, which is in a few weeks' time, I think the most crucial, to get to know the kids as quickly as you can, Because then when you plan, you've got the kids in mind rather than, well, I did this last time, it worked well. It should be, well, I did it work well last time, but will it fit these kids that I've got now? And that's kind of the way we do it. And
are there any tweaks to make or anything like that as well?
Sorry?
And are there any tweaks to make?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because sometimes, the first topic we're doing is Romans now. I've spoken to an author before. She does the book called Escape from Pompeii, and by speaking to authors as well, through Skype, there's so many things out there that teachers just don't know that it's available, like Skype. I always, whatever book we do, I'll email this, I'll find them on Twitter, on Facebook, I'll message them, say, can we talk to you? And a lot of them, we've spoken to about 10 authors now. Wow. That have said yes.
What would you say percentage responses of yes?
I'm quite persistent. I've still not got David Williams yet, but I did meet him a few months ago, and I spoke to him because I did the BBC Teach thing recently. Yeah. And he said he would, I don't know whether he was just being nice, but he said he would speak to us. But I think can you imagine if you're an author and you love kids' books and you know this is your passion, if someone contacted you from the school and says, by the way, we've already bought your books, so that's gone. Could we get you to speak to the kids? And then for 10-15 minutes through Skype, sat in your own comfortable room, you can speak directly to the children that you're writing
directly
for.
To superfans?
Yeah, exactly.
Why wouldn't you?
As a teacher, if you're telling the kids, you guys are going to be authors one day, they kind of believe you. But if you've got an author that they respect and love, telling them that they can be authors themselves, then they believe it that more. And then as well, you stood at the side, and then I always speak to them beforehand. We've spoken to Peter J. Black, who's a wonderful author. What I get him to do is I get him to set a writing task for my class. So he'll write something, and then he's incorporated something in his recent book that one of my kids have written. And I'll always go, could you shout out to this little kid? There's a child that struggles with writing and confidence and believes they're not a good writer, but they've done this wonderful word. Any chance you could just mention that next time we speak to you? And they do. So can you imagine as a child that thinks they're not going to be a good writer, the author calls you up, you stand in front of the camera, and the author says, that word you've written is just blew me, it's wonderful. You can just see the confidence. They just, even the posture, they just grow and they sit back and they think, well, I can do this. Yeah. And it's just nice to see.
It's nice that you use those experiences in that way as well. So it's not just about them being exposed to that, but you try and squeeze every ounce of confidence and things. So have I. It was, how do you plan coverage of a topic?
I don't know.
Okay. So what advice would you give to somebody then who wanted to take their learning bigger than the classroom?
Just give it a go, because you can either achieve what you want and something could happen, and like I talked about before, you don't cap children's what they can achieve. But also, if it doesn't quite go wrong, just address that and then learn from it. Because like we spoke about before, how we're so focused on not making mistakes, but we tell the children it's fine to make mistakes, but we've got to be able to make those mistakes ourselves. And you can just learn. You learn just as much from a lesson that doesn't go well as much as you do from the ones that do. So you learn from, as long as you're learning, it's worth it. It's worth to give it a go.
And the children can still learn from something that doesn't go perfectly well, as well, which I think is important to remember in this. You know, if they are learning, they might not be learning exactly what you planned, but they'll be learning something, and that's important. Completely. So you've mentioned about poetry. How can teachers engage children in their poetry lessons? Right,
well, when I first started teaching and throughout school, I hated poetry because it was boring. And the reason why I hate poetry is because when the teachers used to teach it to us in primary school, you could tell that they didn't like poetry as well. And kids are very good at noticing things, more so than adults. So I found that a lot of teachers with poetry they'll either do an acrostic poem, which is great, but they'll do it in autumn and you'll have to write the autumn down, or at winter. And they'll think, right, oh gosh, I've got a spare week, what am I going to do? I'll do a bit of poetry. And because the emphasis is not on let's celebrate and do poetry, then it's because it's kind of shoehorned in. It doesn't have the effect. And the kids feed off that. So what I've always done whenever I've had my first class, and I'll do this with my class that comes out in September, the first time I do poetry, I just don't tell them that we're doing poetry. What I do is we have Walt and Will, what we are learning to, and usually write the Walt we are learning to, write personification poetry, for example. But I hide the Walt underneath a box, so they just can't see it. So straight away the kids are like, well, what's this lesson? It's hidden. And I say, well your job is to now guess or tell me at the end of the lesson what you think the Walt's going to be. So straight away for the first
They're
time.
engaged.
They want to know what that. They're like, well, I'm going to find out what that is. Because if you tell them we're doing poetry, a lot of kids will have a negative view of poetry, and then you can see that.
They'll already know from somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
Oh, I don't like poems.
Yeah.
Or they'll fixate with trying to rhyme the last word, and they'll rhyme in couplets, which is great if you can do it, but it's a difficult skill to have, and it's something that shouldn't be focused upon. So when I do rivers or whatever topic we do, if we're personifying something, what I'll do is I'll move the classroom, move the tables, so we've got a big space on the floor. I'll roll a big piece of paper down the centre, like the the backing paper. That goes on when you're from B&Q, that huge paper, you can get it for really cheap. I'll roll that down and I'll put a heading, I used to be. So I used to be. And then, I'll give an example of the river poetry that we did. I used to be floating through the air, and I'd show videos of clouds, and I used to be, and you've got to pretend you're that cloud, just write stuff down on that paper. But because it's not on the book and it's separate from what they used to be in the classroom, it's a little bit different. They're just writing sentences because they don't think they're writing poetry yet. So then you do another heading. So do another teaching point, whether it be a video or a discussion, write some more words down. It can be one word or a long word, because when kids get to Key Stage 2 especially, they think a good sentence is a really, 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 really long sentence with loads of adjectives. But they've got to get used to the fact that sometimes 1 or 2 word sentences can be just as powerful, if not more than really long, and you need to have a mixture. I've talked to them about my favourite chocolates and sweets, the heroes or the celebrations, because you've got a bit of everything. If you have something that's the same all the time, you get a bit bored of it. You might like it, but you get bored, but you want a bit of a difference there, and that's the same with sentences: short, medium, long, mix them up a bit. So they write stuff down. And then because you're writing stuff down on a piece of paper that they can all see, those that are a little bit unsure about what to write can have a look at what's going on another page, what other people are writing, so they can steal ideas, because that's what writing is, it's stealing ideas, or magpieing, as we say as teachers. And then you stand back and we have a look at what we've written. I love this word, I love this word. You choose a child that usually doesn't like writing, you pick their piece of work and say, I love the way you've said this, that one word is wonderful. And then you go again and again. And then by the end of the lesson, you've got this huge piece of paper down the centre of the classroom with loads of words, really rich vocabulary, really interesting things that they didn't think they could have written before. And then what I do, I said, right, well, let's go back to the start, and then we start writing on the board. So we do like a shared write together. What should we put for our first sentence? Let's use this, this and this. So we use bits of sentences and put them together, and we make a few sentences on the board. Then we go again and we use some more sentences. And because you're using bits of sentences, they all have ownership of this one piece of writing that you're writing. I'm not just using one child's work, I'm using this, this, this and this. And because sometimes you write things that are quite similar, they all think it's like, oh, I've written that bit, so they take ownership of it. So we write
and then they've got justification that it's good as well, if more children have written something similar.
Yeah, that's great, yeah. And at the end of it, we've got these 4 or 5 verses of a river poem, river personification poetry, that the kids have written, and then what I do is then I'll read it back to them, but I say I'm going to read it back with a bit of music, or with a bit of like a river noise running in the background. We'll turn the lights down a bit, we'll perform it a little bit. So then I read the poem back to them, I talk about intonation, pitch and tone, and because we actually can give it a go right then. And then at the end I say, well, what have we written there? And then some of them will click it's a poem because of the way I've read it, but some of them are not too sure that that's what it is. But then when I reveal the Walt, a personification poem, we can talk it's personification because it was a river at that time, and they understand that a river's not a person, but we personified that river. And we can talk about how a poem doesn't have to rhyme because that one doesn't. So then they get it then, so it clicks. Because if I would have just said at the start of the lesson, today we're going to write a personification poem about a river,
they're switched off
like,
already.
Whoa, how am I supposed to personify a river? It just doesn't work. But by doing it that way, they understand that what they perceive as a difficult thing to do was actually quite easy because we all did it together. So then the next day we'll do it again, and what I do is that big piece of paper that we had down the centre of the classroom, I pin it to the ceiling because we've got those foam squares kind of like we've got in here. Pin it to the ceiling, so then when we're writing it, the kids can look up and they can see what they did the previous day. So then they're writing their own personification poems. So then when we do it again, whether it be on an animal or whatever we're doing, we'll revisit it. They've got that skill then of being able to think, I know what personification poem is. Because another thing that they struggle with is with when you write a poem, what's the grammar? What grammar am I supposed to use? I'm supposed to put a full stop at the end of each sentence. In poems, you don't have to do that. And the good thing about not having, you can just play with punctuation more with a poem. And the kids, the good thing about, Paul Jenkins is a poet who lives in Ramsbottom near me, he talks about this and he says that if the kids know that they can break the rules of grammar, because that's what you're doing when you write a poem, then you kind of know the rules in the first place. So if you know you're breaking a rule, you know the rule in the first place, so you can talk it, so you kind of camouflage talking about grammar because, we know that usually you put a full stop here at this sentence because it's a poem, we don't have to, and they like breaking the rules, because if you say, guys, you can break the rules of grammar, they're going to be, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then you can also, poems, they have so much, you can convey a lot of information in a short piece of writing, and they're not that difficult to write. And then the last thing is, poems have to be performed. It's like writing, if Shakespeare, just no one ever performed his plays, they'd just be on a piece of paper, you wouldn't see what it's supposed to be like. But when we write poems, we perform it, so we always record our group poem, put it on YouTube and different things, and this is kind of what happened with the Orca poetry, that got seen, and other things that we've done as well, that's been seen around the world, and then the kids know how easy it is to do poems. So then I hope that when they go to year 5 or year 6 or whatever class they go to next, when the teacher says we're going to do poems, they're like, I love poems, I'm going to write some. And then what I do as well is I have, to help with poetry and just creative writing in general, I have a book that I give to them at the start of the year, and I said, that's your creative writing book, you can just write whatever you want, be creative, poems, stories, whatever you want, I'm not going to mark it, that's just for you. And when you give them the opportunity just to play with language and write things and not think, it's going to get marked this, they write more and they do it for themselves and for pleasure. So when you do poems and you do different lessons, when they come in class the next day and they're writing on the book and they're bringing you some work because they've just done it themselves, it just adds so much value to creative writing. Then you can tap into that when you start doing your lessons.
I love that idea. I just when you mentioned that, I realised I had that as a child. I remember in year 6, Mrs. Clark, we had a book and it was called a jotter, and for 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the morning we could just write what we wanted. We could, there was a bit of a thing where, you do dots and you do that game squares.
Gosh,
Yes, you could do that, you could write, you could do anything, and I really enjoyed that actually because nobody was looking. I love that idea. That's a really good idea.
But then they write for themselves, not because you told them to, they're writing because they want to.
Yeah, and I remember as a child at home, I did that, and probably fostered by just being able to be free with it and knowing what I was doing was good, believing in it. I love that. So Sian, who works for Classroom Secrets, because I ask everybody if they've got any questions for the guests, she wants to know, what part of teaching do you love the most?
Gosh, that's like such a big question for me, but I'd say just getting to know the kids, just getting to know 30 different kids and personalities, and because I'm quite childish myself, it's wonderful just to go to school and no 2 days are the same, and you get to hang out with kids that they come to school, and when they want to come to school and you see they want to learn, and when you help a child through someone, you got some children that didn't like poetry, and then by the end of it they love poetry. Then that for me is the key thing. I mean, we did Macbeth this year, the last academic year, and if I told them we were going to do Shakespeare, they would have been like, not doing Shakespeare, it's too difficult. But what I did is I had a section of my library that said, do not enter. I taped it up, said, danger, do not go in these books. And already they wanted to know what was in that little thing. Then I gradually, we did Macbeth, and it's quite a linear story. And then they understood the story of Macbeth, and then we did some drama around it. And then I remember I was sat in my room at lunchtime. I'm usually at lunchtime, and my room's like a corner next to the playground. And the kids don't realise that when they think it's lunchtime, they think that windows stop working. They don't realise you can see them still. They think it's just like they're invisible. And I was sat marking some of their work, and some of the lads were playing Shakespeare outside my room, and I was like, yes. I wish Ofsted was here and stuff to watch kids playing Shakespeare outside. And these are year 4 kids. So I think...
And boys.
Yeah, and boys, yeah. And so just getting to know children, just getting to see that that light bulb moment when someone understands something that they struggled with at the start, and when you get to the end of the year, I'm a mess last week, because you spend 4 or 5 days each week for the whole year with these kids. You get to know their personalities, they get to know you, you have such a lovely relationship. And then the last week, you're kind of aware that, oh gosh, I've got to let these kids go to the next class, and then it starts again. It's such a difficult thing. But I think it's good that it's a difficult thing because it must mean something for me and for them as well.
Yeah.
That
you've built those relationships.
Yeah. And I like to, because being a male primary school teacher, like 6 foot, I'm quite tall, I could be quite intimidated. I remember when I was at school, they had a guy at school that was a bit scary. I never want to be considered as this scary teacher, so I go and pop into reception year 1 and year 2 and I say hello to them and they all know who I am and I smile at them, and I think it's such a nice thing to have that they want to be in my class. So when they get in class, they all think it's fun and games at first because they think it's my stunts class, but they realise very quickly that I care about them because I do. And they always give the best back for me, so that's kind of what works for me, just getting to know them. And I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah. Hannah wants to know, if you weren't teaching, what would you be doing?
Don't know, honestly. I thought about that question and I really don't know, because I mean I did come into teaching quite late, but it's because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I kind of knew I didn't go to university. I was 22 and I did sports science, so throughout school I chose subjects that I was interested in. And then when I was in university, we did a 3-week placement because I thought I might want to be a PE teacher at secondary school. So I did a 3-week placement at a secondary school. I hated it. It just didn't fit with me. And then by chance, the primary school next door, they said, "Would you help us out for a few days?" And I worked at that school for a few days and thought, "I love this. This is what I want to do." And I did my experience, and eventually I got my PGC. But I'm really into technology and gadgets and gizmos, and I think maybe something creative around that side of it. But it's such a hard question because I honestly don't know what I'd do if I wasn't a teacher. I really don't know.
Hannah, that's your answer.
Unemployed.
Unemployed, yeah. So you've mentioned on the Friday you do CPD. What do you actually do your CPD courses about?
So I do a mixture between, I work with different companies and organisations, and so at the moment I'm working with Clever Cogs, who do bring escape rooms to schools, which
I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, which it's just fun. So I'm involved with them because I just enjoy it and I believe in what they're doing, and I work with a couple of organisations as well. Just things that I'm interested in. And when I do CPD sessions, it's usually based on, when people see my Facebook, they see that I use a lot of technology and creative ways of teaching. So they look at my CPD sessions around that. But what I do is I go into a school, and before I go in, I've got like a certain amount of things that I'll cover. But I'll look at their school development plan and ask them, well, what would you like me to help you with?
Yeah.
And then when I go in, it's more tailored to what they want. I don't think there's a specific one course that fits with every school, because each school is different. So sometimes I go into school and they haven't got the technology.
Bespoke, based on what they need.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I do. And I've just I have a Friday, but my school are quite flexible. So sometimes if a school wants me to come in on a Tuesday, I move my Friday to a Tuesday, so I'm allowed to move my day around depending on
that's helpful.
What fits. But yeah, so, and I also, if one Friday I'm not working, I get to take my little son to school, so that's a nice thing that I wouldn't usually have.
Yeah, and I guess I suppose on those Fridays where you're not necessarily working, you're sort of working on your things from home.
Yeah,
and
I can work on my Facebook page more than I had last time. I used to work in the evenings, put a video up, and I do it in the evenings. But now, if I've got nothing on, I put something that I can spend more time on it, and I can just contact people and speak to different companies. And I'm quite surprised with where my career has taken me, because when I became a teacher, I thought you're a teacher, SLT, deputy head, retired. I thought that's what you go for. I had no idea that there are these different avenues and things you could go into, because I just didn't know. But there's so many things out there. So NQTs maybe starting in this September, or people that have been teaching for a while, there is other stuff that you can get into. And you just kind of got to look for it and know that it's there.
Yeah, so you can move into it. Yeah, I like that. I don't know if you know, but Classroom Secrets has got a life-work balance campaign on at the moment. I believe in it a lot. If you could wave a magic wand, what would your solution to the life-work balance problem be? I'd
be a millionaire if I had this wand. But if I did have this wand, I would get rid of pointless exercises for teachers. There's some schools have excessive marking, like this deep mark in some schools. Deep mark for 1, 2, 3 pieces a day, and you can spend hours doing this. And it depends on schools' marking policy. I know it's changing at the moment. The government are trying to say we don't want the reliance on marking, but then there's still an evidence of what your marking is. So I would do away with pointless paper exercises that, as a teacher, I mean, teachers will know. Sometimes you're filling stuff in and you think, I'm doing this because I have to. But if it doesn't benefit the child that you're teaching, then it shouldn't be done no matter what it is. It shouldn't happen.
Do you think, like, when you say that, it always confuses me because every school's different, so you can never see every teacher's experience, but examples of what exactly? Right,
so at the moment we're in maths, so we used to do comments in maths. Now at the moment what we do in our school, we've changed our math. You have to take a risk to try something a bit different. So we have a number policy, so 1, 2 or 3. So if they're a 1, they haven't quite got it yet, but they're on the journey. If they're a 2, they've understood what they've done and they've got that subject on a mathematical concept. If they're a 3, it means a greater depth. And what we do, we mark during the lesson. So it's so much more valuable it's quite, the lesson's busier because you have to get around, but you don't usually have marking in the evening because you've just done a tick. And you can then, if someone's struggling, if you're running around with your TA, not running around, but if you're going around with your TA and marking things at that time when they're struggling, it's so much more powerful if you're then able to say, oh, well, we need to do this, or come to our focus group, rather than the day after, them carrying on getting it wrong, and then reading marking saying, you should have done this, this and this, because it's gone past then. Yeah. It's giving them that verbal feedback straight away. And some kids just don't read it. You know, sometimes, this is if you do some marking, you know the kids that possibly need to read it just won't read it. So that's it depends on the school's marking policy. I know it's such a difficult thing, but it would save some, and just believe in the teachers a little bit more. Let the teachers teach.
Yeah, and I love that as well, because when I first came into primary school, I'd been in secondary before, and I remember sitting down with a group, because that's what I was told to do. I never learnt to do that when I did my PGCE, because it was secondary and I did performing arts. And I think, what are all the other children doing? How will I steer them? And I used to sit down and mark all the books at the end. I used to think, well, I've just wasted a lesson here. Now, how do I get around that? Yet when I was on supply, I used to sort of be naughty, and I used to go around the class and mark as they were going rather than sit with a group. And, I remember being told off for doing that. Frequently, I'd always be looking outside the classroom, because it was in the time where you sit down with a group and you don't move. Actually, now it's becoming a thing where people are recognising actually that's useful for them to know in the lesson. Another thing I used to do as well is I used to hate guided reading, especially on supply, because you don't know all the different little groups that they had. And I'd take a text and I'd do it as a whole class. But that was when you weren't allowed to do that, and when you weren't allowed to kind of helicopter, as it were. But I did that to kind of get me through the day, so that I didn't have to stay really long on an evening. So I kind of think that does make sense to help teachers with a life-work balance, to be able to actually react in the lesson instead of waiting. We all know, don't we, that feedback, you need it straight away. If you've fallen out with your wife, then if you don't say something straight away and you say it the next day, it's never going to have the same amount of impact, is it?
No.
So I think it's really, really good that it's kind of coming round.
But the government have realised this, but then we still have the testing system that we have in the country that you have to still pass. But I do think just straight away, if you can say, you need to do this at the time they're doing it, then it's much better than doing it, talking about it the day after when it's already gone. Yeah, when you've already kind of cemented in your mind, I'm doing it this way, and then time has passed, and maybe you've thought about it, and you've kind of, I don't know, maybe it's gone into a different pocket of memory. As well, because although you're busy during class, you go home, and I don't often, if ever, take books back. In fact, our head on the door, he has do you know those trolleys that you see teachers walking around with that break all the time with books in? He's got a couple of years ago, one of the teachers was taking one of those home, and it broke because it had so many books in. So he's got a sign on the door. It's got a cross that says on that box, so no marking allowed to go home. But again, it's all on your SLT and your leadership at the school, how that works.
Buying into that and trusting that. Sometimes I think it's when leadership worry that your teachers aren't going to pass Ofsted for you. So you give all these, you got to trust that the teachers are going to have you back, even if you allow them to have more of a life.
Yeah, but then if the SLT is doing that for the Ofsted, it's not for the kids, it's to have a good Ofsted report, which is not what it's about. No,
not what it's about, but I can also understand why they might do that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, right, so we've got some quick fire questions then.
Okay.
You don't have to answer them quickly if you don't want, but who's your favourite teacher and why?
Year 6, Mrs. Parker. You always remember the teacher you love and the teacher you didn't like. Mrs. Parker was the first teacher. I was very shy in primary school, extremely shy in secondary school, which is why I didn't go to university till I was 22, 23. I couldn't have coped at 18. I was just too within myself. And then I didn't start teaching until I was 28, 29. Miss Parker, she did things a bit differently. She believed in me. She could see I liked creativity. I used to like art. I was quite a good artist when I was younger, so she asked me to paint things and do things for her. And she's the first teacher that really took an interest in the shy boy. Because I was quite a middle ground, just beige, just sailed through.
Yeah.
Excellent behaviour, never a worry academically, but just sailed through the middle. But she's the first person to sort of pick me up. And I wish and I hope that Miss Parker, if she ever sees anything that I'm doing,
she's listening. Hopefully,
I really do hope she does, because she had a son called Simon as well. I don't know if that was a thing as well, at the same age as me. But I'd love her to see that I became a teacher because of her. So she's the reason why I became a teacher, and she's kind of the model myself on.
Yeah, you need to try and seek her out and get her to listen.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. What do you wish you'd known when you first started out in teaching?
The first one, like I mentioned before, that there's lots of other things in education that you can do. The second one is that, there'll be a lot of NQTs starting in September that think they have to know everything. They need to know everything from day one. There's no way that you could possibly know everything. And even those people that have been teaching for 10, 20, 30 years, still no one knows everything because it changes all the time. So I would say if anyone's listening to this worried about should I know every single subject, grammatical term, spelling method, teaching method, no, you don't need to know everything. You learn on the job. And please don't think you have to know everything from the start. And I wish I would have known that from the start myself, because I just got myself in a bit of worked up over the summer. I got worried, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to do this? I don't know everything. And you get stressed out yourself, like with the well-being. You think you need to know everything, but you don't. Yeah,
and it is quite normal, isn't it, to be a lesson ahead of the children in your knowledge, especially in topic.
And ask teachers as well, because every teacher had SLT at some point. They were an NQT at the school, so they'll know what that feeling's like. So you'd be quite surprised if you ask people that you work with, look, I'm struggling with this. It's okay to say that you're struggling with something or ask for help, because teachers will help you.
And I kind of hope they do get that help, because I do think sometimes on some of the Facebook groups it can be a bit negative, which I find such a shame. It's okay to not know something. Okay, what are the 3 biggest changes that you've seen during your time in education?
So, let me think. So I've been teaching for 10 years now. I'd say one thing is the interactive whiteboard projectors to normal screens. I used to have, one of those boards that the projector kind of stuck out? I used to bang my head on it all the time. So we had all projectors, so the text kind of changed. So we've gone to, a lot of schools have gone to iPads and Chromebooks. So a lot more content based on electrical iPads and different things like that. That's one. Another one, I'd say the funding and the TAs. So when I first started teaching, every school, every teacher had 1 or sometimes 2 TAs every lesson. Now with the funding just disappearing, those TAs are the first ones to go, and TAs are so important for a school. A good teacher is a good teacher because they've got a good TA. And the funding of teaching assistants disappearing is just completely. I work in the Bury Council. They've lost 28 million in the past, and there's a big thing going on at the moment, and James Frith, the MP there, is really campaigning to get some funding back to schools, and budgets are so tight and it's so difficult, because at the end we want to do the best for the kids, but we haven't got support there. It's sometimes quite difficult. So I'd say that's definitely another one. Let me think. So that's 2, isn't it? So what's the other one? I'd say how social media's kind of crept in there. So when I first started teaching, we had some like tests and primary resources that we used to look on. But now there's a lot of things online that help teachers. So like classroom secrets and like different resources you can get online, but also teachers helping each other online. So with the Facebook groups, sharing things. So I've shared lots of things on my page, and I've had teachers message me back saying, I used your lesson in class last week, it was wonderful, thank you. And I've also seen people, if you need help with something, as much as there might be 1 or 2 that are quite negative, because there's always
a hater.
Mood hoover in the room. A lot of people will help you. So if you say, I need help with this, what do you think? And if you look on all the groups, people help each other all the time, because at the end of the day, if you're withholding information because you don't want to tell that teacher because it's one of your ideas, you're not affecting that teacher, affecting the teacher the kids that teacher teaches. And we're all on the job to teach and help kids. So if you've got some information that if you've got a quick 2 minutes to type and help someone out, then I think you should do it, because it will help the children they teach. And also, we're all teachers, just sharing the burden and sharing the knowledge to help each other out. And I think that's a thing with social media that has kind of crept in, and within schools as well, because I mean, a lot of things, you get Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups with kids falling out with each other in year 6 and now year 5, and it's going lower and lower. So I think social media is a good and a bad thing depending on which way you look at it, but we need to have a balanced view of social media.
It also might help a teacher spend a Sunday afternoon with their own children.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly. Rather than search, if you're looking for a specific resource and you're searching, you're spending 2-3 hours. But if you could have popped that on Facebook and somebody, it's here, ping, you've got 2 hours back to your life that you can then do, relax and get ready for the next day. Pay it forward,
yeah. Where do you think education needs to go in the next 10 years?
Need some money for a start. I think with the governments, there's such a change in the government at the moment, and I really hope that they focus on education suffering, but we're taking money from you. I hope that money goes back to schools, so then each class could have it. I'd love each class to have a TA full time every time. And also, I think because obviously the technology is a bit more, it's around more with iPads and different types of things, but I really think we have to use an iPad or use something to enhance teaching and learning, not as a gimmick. If it's a gimmick, then don't use it. I've been to so many schools that have said we need some help with iPads, but all they use iPads for is just Safari, just searching. Okay. And it's not being used for what it is. It's
might as well get a HD Fire or something.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, you'll get a school that go, right, everyone's buying iPads, let's buy iPads and put 60 apps. And then you'll get those teachers that struggle, that been teaching for a while or just not tech savvy, that if you throw 60 iPads at 60 apps at someone, this does this, they're like, whoa, where do I start from? My advice is if you get a set of iPads, look at 3 or 4 apps or things that will help everyone and the kids, and then focus on those and then gradually expand rather than chuck a load of apps at people. That's a good idea, and help each other out and get people into it that know.
You wouldn't do that on your own phone, would you? You wouldn't get an iPhone and go, right, I'm going to buy 60 apps. You would just get them as you need them, and you can implement them into your life. Yeah,
so I think we've got to go down the route. We need funding, we need TAs, and we need to make sure the technology that we are getting in schools is used and utilised as best as it can be.
In the correct way. Okay, good. Who's your inspiration within education?
Do you know what? There's so many different things I could think of here. There's lots of people that I follow on Facebook and teachers and people that I've met in educational business, like Damien Challenger, who works for Nexus Education. He's put me in contact with different people, and now that's how I ended up in Barcelona recently. But easily the first answer is the kids that you teach, because that's what education's about, the children. So they're my inspiration, because they come into school. Some come for breakfast club before school. They're there with you from 9 till 3. Then they go to after school club, and then they go home, and then they have much more resilience sometimes, and give them credit for it. And they're, I'd say the kids that we teach, those are my inspiration, because some of them, I got I won't say it was, but when we left school last year, the kids that have just gone up, I had a letter from a parent it was a grandmother, because one of the children in my class went through a lot of things at home. She lost a family member basically, and she wrote a lovely letter that explained that was so happy going to school, and that you've done this, this and this, and that one letter means so much as a teacher, more than anything that someone could, all the gifts you get at the end of the day, which is lovely, but that one thing, to know that child managed to stay in class and was happy because of you, it means a lot.
Yeah. And if you're listening on the podcast, we're getting a bit emotional right now.
I get emotional all the time.
Yeah. That's.
But yeah, definitely the kids.
That's one of the reasons for doing it, isn't it? Okay, last question. I don't think you knew the answer to this, but what did you want to be when you grew up?
I don't know, and I don't think I've grown up yet. Because I've said this, do you know what? I actually had this conversation. I said to the kids, what would you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, this, and this. And I said to my TA, Mrs. Bowler, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had a conversation with her before that. I don't think you ever grow up. I don't think you ever stop wanting to do things. Yeah. So I'd like to, when I grow up, I'd like to be an author. I'd love to write a book one day that kids read. So yeah, that's my answer. I'd like
So
to
that's going to be on the Fridays when you've not got anything booked in. You're going to start writing your book.
Because one of my friends, Anna Lucas, she's written a book called Sarah Undercracker. It's about a guy that wears underpants on his head, and my little boy loves it. And it's really nice to know someone that's written a book that my boy loves reading. And he puts underpants on his head sometimes, clean ones. I've told him about putting a dip ones on. But I'd love to be able to create something that someone reads at bedtime, because story time in the evening is my favourite time of the evening. Some stories are kind of bored of reading. You can just recite a certain book like off by heart. My little boy's into dinosaur books at the moment, which is great. Just a bit pronunciation's not great. He's got a better pronunciation than me with some of those dinosaurs. But yeah, so when I grow up, I'd love to be an author.
Yeah. In fact,
what about yourself? What would you like to be when you grow up?
I want to still be an entrepreneur in a million different businesses. I've got all these ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, I just like, I like doing new things as well. Just, I kind of like to set a crazy goal and go, oh yeah, let's just see if we can do it. Like setting up a podcast in 4.5 weeks.
There you go. How's it going for you so far?
Good. It's going really, really good. We've got some great guests, so thank you for coming. But yeah, just doing something a bit wild. But just what you said about the authors then, I was just thinking, I'd never thought of that connection when you said about bedtime reading. And do you know what? There are some books that I really hate. And, we'll look at the shelf and she'll pick one and we'll be like, not that book.
It's really long.
Yeah, it's really long. It's really boring.
Doesn't make sense.
But some of them, I'm like, shall we read this one? Because I like it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right. So when you've written one, my daughter can read it and I'll tell you whether it's any good or not.
In businesses, I think Mr. Hunt from the Front author extraordinaire could be a potential business.
Well, there you go.
We'll write a check later, we'll sort that out.
Yeah, and you'll have to come back on the podcast when you launch that. And I've got a 3-year-old tester, so.
Good.
Yeah, brilliant.
The best ones to test on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem, thank you.
And this will be going out very shortly. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.